My name is Khalil. I am 42 years old. I was born into a life most people only see in photographs. Palace walls carved from stone older than memory. Corridors so long that footsteps echoed before you even moved. Servants who never met my eyes. Guards who never left my side. From the moment I could walk, I was told who I was and who I would become. A prince, a symbol, a responsibility. My name carried weight before I understood its meaning. People bowed when I entered rooms. Teachers softened their voices when correcting me. Mistakes were hidden, not forgiven. Weakness was unacceptable. Emotion was dangerous. I learned early that my life did not belong to me. It belonged to tradition, bloodline, and expectation. Faith was not taught as love. It was taught as survival. I memorized prayers before I understood words. I bowed because I was told to bow. I obeyed because obedience kept peace. And yet, every time I finished praying, I felt nothing. No warmth. No closeness. Only silence. At night, when the palace finally slept, I would sit alone in rooms lit by chandeliers and feel unbearably small. Surrounded by luxury, yet empty. Protected yet afraid. I never spoke of it. In my world, silence was safer than honesty. I tried to fix myself. I became more disciplined, more obedient. I studied harder. I trained my body and mind until exhaustion became routine. I followed every rule perfectly, believing that peace would eventually come if I just did more. But it never did. Instead, the emptiness grew heavier. I began asking questions, not out loud, but inside my own thoughts. Why does God feel distant? Why does fear rule faith? Why does obedience feel hollow? I hated myself for these questions. I believed they were sins. So I buried them deeper and smiled wider. From the outside, I was the perfect son. Inside, I was slowly disappearing. The moment my life changed did not arrive with drama. It came quietly. I was traveling abroad on official business, surrounded by advisors and security, when I met a man who spoke about God differently than anyone I had ever known. He wasn't aggressive. He wasn't afraid. There was no anger in his voice, only calm certainty. He spoke of forgiveness instead of punishment, love instead of fear, a God who wanted closeness, not control. I argued with him at first, corrected him, defended everything I had been taught. But the more he spoke, the more something inside me stirred, something I had spent years suppressing. Before we parted, he handed me a small book wrapped in plain paper. "Read this when you're alone," he said. I knew what it was before I touched it. That night, I locked my door. My hand shook as I unwrapped the Bible. Possessing it was enough to have me executed. Even reading it was treason. Every instinct screamed to destroy it. But curiosity was stronger than fear. I began to read. And within minutes, something happened that I still struggle to explain. The words did not feel foreign. They felt familiar, as if they were answering questions I had never dared to ask aloud. When I read about Jesus, I did not feel threatened. I felt known. I read about grace, mercy, sacrifice, and love that did not demand perfection. I read until dawn, tears falling onto pages I was never meant to see. For the first time in my life, I prayed without memorized words. I whispered, and I felt peace. Not excitement, not emotion. Peace. Over the following weeks, I read in secret. Late nights, locked doors, silent prayers. The emptiness that had haunted me for decades began to loosen its grip. I smiled genuinely for the first time in my adult life. But peace came with fear. I knew what discovery would mean. I knew the cost. Every page I turned was a step toward death. And yet, I could not stop. Because for the first time, I was not pretending to believe. I was alive. Secrets do not disappear. They wait. At first, I thought I was careful. I hid the Bible beneath floor panels, inside travel cases, wrapped in clothes meant for official appearances. I prayed silently. I smiled publicly. I performed every ritual expected of me, even when my heart was no longer in it. But faith changes a person in ways that are difficult to conceal. I grew quieter. I withdrew from conversations that once felt effortless. Certain prayers caught in my throat. Certain words no longer felt honest on my lips. I began to avoid gatherings where religious discussions turned aggressive, where hatred was disguised as righteousness. People noticed. In the palace, nothing goes unseen for long. Servants whisper. Guards observe. Advisors report subtle shifts in behavior. What I believed was privacy was only delay. The night they came for me, there was no warning. I was reading. The door burst open with such force that it struck the wall behind it. Armed men flooded the room. I stood frozen, my heart hammering so violently I thought it would give me away before they even searched. They overturned furniture, pulled drawers apart, cut open cushions. When one of them reached beneath the floor panel, I knew it was over. The Bible rested in his hands like evidence already condemned. No one spoke. I was grabbed, blindfolded, and dragged through corridors I had walked my entire life. The marble floors felt colder than ever beneath my bare feet. I tried to remember every turn, every sound, knowing I might never see these halls again. In that moment, something inside me broke, not fear, but illusion. I finally understood that my title meant nothing. Blood could not protect belief. Wealth could not shield conviction. I was not a prince anymore. I was a criminal. The cell was smaller than I imagined. Concrete walls. No windows. A single bulb hanging from the ceiling, flickering as if uncertain it should exist at all. The door closed behind me with a sound that echoed far longer than it should have. Time lost its meaning. I don't know how many days passed. Hunger came in waves. Fear never left. I replayed every choice, every prayer, every page I had read. I asked God questions I had never dared to ask before. Was this real? Was I wrong? Was this worth dying for? The door finally opened. I expected guards. Instead, I saw my father. He did not rush toward me. He did not raise his voice. He stood still, studying my face like he was trying to recognize someone he no longer knew. Behind him came religious scholars and judges, their expressions disciplined and unreadable. They placed a metal table between us and laid photographs across it. Photographs of my life. Me holding the Bible. Me praying with Christians. Me celebrating Christmas. Each image felt like a nail sealing my fate. They spoke calmly, almost kindly. They told me I was confused, influenced, misled. They said it could all be erased if I cooperated, if I denied everything, if I burned the Bible publicly, if I spoke the right words. They promised restoration, my title, my family, my future. For a moment, I wanted to say yes. I wanted my mother. I wanted safety. I wanted the life I had lost in a single mistake. But I knew something they did not. Returning would mean lying to my own soul. When I refused, the room changed. My father finally spoke. "You are no longer my son." The words landed quietly, but they shattered everything inside me. I realized then that the execution was not the real punishment. Exile was. They pronounced the sentence without ceremony. Apostasy. Treason. Death by fire. As I was led back to my cell, I did not cry. I felt hollow, but not empty. For the first time in my life, I knew exactly who I was. And I knew it might cost me everything. The morning of my execution arrived quietly. There was no dramatic announcement. No final conversation. Just the sound of keys, boots, and chains. They entered my cell before sunrise and ordered me to stand. My body felt weak from hunger, but my mind was painfully clear. I knew exactly what this day meant. They chained my wrists behind my back. As they led me through the corridors, I noticed details I had never paid attention to before: the way the air felt cooler near the exits, the echo of footsteps, the smell of stone and metal. It struck me how calm everything was. How routine. As if death were simply another scheduled task. When we stepped outside, the sun was rising. The square was already full. I could hear voices before I saw faces, hundreds of them. Some whispered. Some prayed. Some sounded excited. I realized then that my death was not just punishment. It was a warning. They wanted others to see what happens when someone steps outside the line. At the center of the square stood the stake, with stacked carefully around it, darkened by gasoline. The smell hit me immediately, sharp and suffocating. My stomach turned. My legs trembled despite my effort to stay upright. They tied me tightly. Rope burned against my wrists and chest. I looked out at the crowd, searching faces for mercy, for doubt, for anything human. I found none. The charges were read aloud. Apostasy, treason, betrayal of blood and faith. Then came the final offer. One last chance to live. Renounce Christianity. Speak the words. Walk away. My heart raced. My thoughts scattered. I thought of my mother. I thought of my childhood. I thought of how easy it would be to lie and survive. But survival without truth felt like another kind of death. I shook my head. The torch was lit. The moment the flames touched the wood, everything became chaos. Fire climbed faster than I imagined. Heat slammed into my legs, my chest, my face. Pain unlike anything I had ever known tore through my body. I screamed. My mind fractured. Thoughts dissolved into terror. I could feel my skin burning. I believed this was the end. This was where everything stopped. With nothing left, no strength, no pride, no identity, I cried out in English, not Arabic. Jesus, if you are real, save me! And then, rain. The rain did not fall gently. It crashed down violently, as if the sky itself had split open. Within seconds, the flames vanished. Smoke rose into the air. People screamed. Some ran. Others fell to their knees. I was still standing. I could feel my heart beating, my lungs pulling in air. I looked down at my body, expecting to see charred flesh, exposed bone. Instead, I saw burns, but not death. The square was silent. Guards backed away from me, as if I were untouchable. Religious leaders stared in disbelief. No one approached. No one spoke. Fear had replaced certainty. They untied me without meeting my eyes. I was taken away immediately. Doctors examined me in private rooms. They whispered to each other. They repeated the same phrases. This should not be possible. The burns were real, but survivable. My vital organs were untouched. No explanation satisfied them. But miracles are dangerous in places built on control. The royal family acted quickly. They could not execute me again, not publicly. Not after what everyone had seen. But they could not let me live freely either. So they erased me. Official documents declared Prince Khalil dead. My name was removed from records. A new identity was created under strict secrecy. I was informed of my fate in a quiet room with no ceremony. Exile. Permanent. I was given 48 hours to leave the country forever. If I ever returned, I would be killed quietly. No trial. No fire. No witnesses. I asked to see my mother. They refused. I was not allowed to say goodbye to anyone. That hurt more than the flames. Escorted under heavy guard, I left Saudi Arabia not as a prince, not as a criminal, but as a ghost. Alive, breathing, yet officially non-existent. As the plane lifted into the air, I looked down at the land that had shaped me, confined me, and nearly destroyed me. I had survived fire, but I had lost everything else. Crossing the border felt unreal. There was no ceremony, no announcement, no final look back. One moment I was a problem the kingdom needed to erase, and the next I was just another man stepping into a foreign land with borrowed documents and a name that wasn't mine. Jordan did not welcome me with comfort. It welcomed me with reality. The first place I stayed was a small, dim apartment hidden among dozens of others. The walls were thin. The mattress was worn. The air smelled of dust and cooking oil. There were no guards, no servants, no one waiting for instructions. For the first time in my life, I was entirely responsible for myself. At night, I lay awake listening to unfamiliar sounds, cars passing, voices in the distance, dogs barking. Every noise made my body tense. I was no longer protected by power or position. Anyone could kill me, and no one would answer for it. And yet, something unexpected happened. I felt lighter. For the first time, no one expected me to perform. No one bowed. No one feared me. I was invisible, and that invisibility felt like freedom. I learned how to live again in small, humbling ways. I stood in lines. I bought my own food. I washed my clothes by hand. Each task reminded me that I was human before I was royal. I prayed constantly, not because I was afraid, but because I finally could. No guards outside the door. No consequences for honesty. I spoke openly to God, sometimes with gratitude, sometimes with anger, sometimes with tears I didn't know I was holding back. I met others like me. Former Muslims who had lost families, homes, and identities for their faith. Their stories were different, yet painfully familiar. Some had been beaten, some imprisoned, some disowned entirely. Sitting with them, I realized my suffering was not unique, but my survival carried responsibility. Together, we healed slowly. There were moments of deep loneliness. Moments when I missed my mother so intensely it felt like physical pain. Moments when I questioned whether surviving the fire had been mercy or burden. But every time doubt returned, peace followed. Not excitement. Not happiness. Peace. And that peace reminded me that the palace had never been my home. It had been my cage. I could have disappeared. Many advised me to change my name again. Move to another country. Live quietly. Forget the past. Forget the fire. Forget the calling that came with survival. But silence felt like betrayal. I had been spared for a reason, and I knew it. Slowly, carefully, I began to speak. Not publicly. Not loudly. In whispers. In safe houses. In cafes where conversations blended into background noise. In apartments with curtains always drawn. People came with questions they were too afraid to ask anyone else. Why did you change? Why are you willing to die for this? Is peace really possible? I never argued. I never forced. I only told my story. And lives began to change. With change came danger. My movements were watched. My name, old and new, appeared on lists. There were whispers of bounties. Of men willing to finish what the fire had failed to do. I moved often. Slept lightly. Trusted cautiously. It was during this time that I met Sarah. She didn't see a prince or a miracle. She saw a man, wounded, hunted, but honest. I told her everything early on. The fire. The exile. The danger that followed me like a shadow. She didn't flinch. Our relationship grew slowly, carefully, under constant threat. Love, I learned, is not loud in dangerous places. It is quiet, intentional, brave. We married in secret. No palace. No guests. No celebration. Just a handful of believers, whispered vows, and faith stronger than fear. As I held her hand, I knew I was giving her a life that would never be safe, but would always be meaningful. Together, we chose purpose. Over comfort. Over security. Over silence. And for the first time, I understood that survival was not the end of my story. It was the beginning of my calling. Time has a strange way of reshaping pain. Years passed. Slowly, carefully. The wounds never disappeared, but they transformed. What once burned became guidance. What once terrified me became testimony. Safe houses were built. Quiet schools opened. People found faith not because I convinced them, but because truth has a way of reaching hearts that fear once controlled. I watched men cry as they prayed freely for the first time. I watched women find dignity where shame once ruled. I listened to stories that mirrored my own pain in different forms. One day, I held my daughter in my arms. She was small, fragile, unaware of the fire that had shaped her father's life. As she slept against my chest, something inside me settled completely. I understood then why I survived. Not to escape death, but to live with purpose. The fire that was meant to erase me became the moment that defined me. I lost my name. I lost my family. I lost my country. But I gained truth, clarity, and a life built on something unshakable. If my story teaches anything, it is this. Faith that costs nothing changes nothing. Truth demands everything, but gives more in return. I once stood in flames meant to destroy me. Now I stand in purpose. And I would choose it all again,